The second picture I want to work with is the orchids. So let me go ahead and select it and open it in the develop module. Now, what I want to do with this picture is give it some contrast because it looks faded and so forth. So let me go ahead and work with that. On the right side of the develop module, remember that we have the histogram, the basic, and the detail panels, which are the panels that we use most. The first thing I want to do is open the histogram and see what's happening. Remember, the histogram is the distribution of the tone values in a photo. It seems that this photo has a lot of grays, for example. The left side of the histogram panel, if you see I hover over the left side, it says blacks. It represents the shadows. The right side represents the highlights, and then the middle section is the midtones. So what you want to avoid when working in the histogram is spikes of highlights or spikes of shadows. I currently have already a white spike right here, a spike of a highlight, which means that I have pure whites in my picture that lack detail. Let me show you that as I open the basic panel and add some exposure. So I'm obviously under the exposure, and I want to drag the slider to the right to add even more exposure, just to show you what happens, how the spike increases. So as I'm dragging the slider to the right, just watch what's happening in the highlight section of the histogram. You can see that the spike is adding even more. So by all means, you want to avoid having a spike altogether, because having a spike in the highlights or the shadows section of the histogram means that you have white or black pure pixels that have been clipped, which means that lack detail. To show you these pure white pixels, I can hover over this triangle right here, and what you see in red represents the pure white pixels that don't have detail, that have been clipped. So in all your pictures, you want to make sure to avoid having spikes, hence clipping. To show you the other extreme, I can add blacks now to this picture. So as I'm dragging the slider, just watch what's happening in the shadow section of the histogram. A spike is being formed, which means I definitely have pure black pixels that lack detail and that have been clipped. So let me hover over this triangle to show you that. And as you can see, this blue section is representing the black pixels that have been clipped. So the blue color represents the pure black pixels, and the red color represents the pure white pixels. Obviously, this picture to begin with is not an ideal picture. I've shot it on purpose facing the window to have a bad result, just for the purpose of this assignment, to show you what clipping is and how to avoid it. We can work a bit with this picture. It's not an ideal picture, but just to show you that you can enhance it a bit by adding some brightness and some contrast, and also by working with the fill, light, and recovery. Now, what fill light is, fill light basically brightens the shadows of a photo that are pure blacks and lacking detail. So we can work with that because this is what we need here. And hopefully the spike goes down. And recovery is for blown out highlights, and its purpose is to keep the highlights from becoming pure whites. So we do have pure whites here. We can work a bit with the recovery by dragging it up so that hopefully the spike goes down, but it's not really working because to begin with, our picture is not ideal, and whether we like it or not, we do have spikes here. We can add some saturation to this picture. Let me hover outside this section, and then we can add some saturation. Remember not to add too much saturation because it becomes unnatural. Let me show you what happens if I add a lot. It adds too much color and it becomes so unnatural. So whenever you're adding saturation to a photograph, just make sure not to add too much. And then you can also add some clarity, which makes an image clearer, and then some vibrance, which will make it vibrant. Remember again that this picture is not ideal. We will work on other pictures and use these great tools to enhance the picture, especially the clarity, the vibrance, the saturation, and the contrast. But again, remember the purpose of this exercise was to show you how clipping happens when we have spikes, when we have pure blacks and pure whites that we definitely need to avoid. Now, one last thing I can tell you is we can choose to trust Lightroom, and instead of doing the changes ourselves, just click on Auto, and Lightroom will give us what it thinks is the best that can be done with this picture. So let me go ahead and click on that, and it changed it to this result, which is not bad. If you see the difference, I'm holding down the backslash key, I'm clicking on the backslash key. There is some enhancement between how the picture was, dull and so forth, and how it became, but it's not perfect. So remember, this exercise was only to cover the histogram panel and how to avoid the pure whites and the pure blacks in order to avoid clipping.